joining us this evening. We are here to talk about the Valley Rail Station, Sacramento Extension, and the proposed Elk Grove Station. And I'd like to turn it over to Mayor Bobby Singh Allen to say a few words. Mayor Singh Allen.
So it's a great pleasure to be with you. I'm coming here live from Oasis Park. Tonight's meeting is very important as we get the Valley Rail Sacramento Extension here in Elk Grove, which again is so important to our community. It will help alleviate so much of our traffic congestion. It will address some of our, I'm getting all kinds of interruptions, I'm sorry. Hopefully you can hear me. It will help alleviate a lot of our traffic congestion problems that we all experience on a daily basis. So I am so excited for this meeting to get more information to our community. But tonight there's something very pressing, and I'm coming to you live here from Oasis Park with the family of Kaflit Gebrabariam, who is an elderly gentleman who went missing over 2 weeks ago. And I'm joined here with the family members. We are going to put up a flyer on the screen that will give a tip line for anybody who has seen him. Somebody out there knows something, and I know that there's over 100 participants. And so I am just hopeful and praying that somebody out there, one of your friends or family, please share this flyer widely so that we can bring closure to this family who are missing their loved one. And like I said, he's been missing almost 2 weeks, and somebody out there knows something. So I'm going to be walking with this family today. And this is one of the last areas he was spotted here in Oasis Park. But I'm hoping one of you knows maybe where he might be, or one of your friends. So please spread the word, share the flyer. Thank you all for letting me join you this evening. This is a great first step for getting an important new amenity to our city. So thank you, everyone. And I'll see you all later.
Thank you, Mayor Singh Allen. Okay, this meeting is also serving as an official notice of the beginning of the environmental impact report process. We will hold a question and answer portion later in the meeting. However, for formal comments, they must be sent in writing. And there are a couple of ways that you can do that. You can email your comments to elkgrovestation@gmail.com, or you can mail your comments to the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, attention Elk Grove Station Project NOP, and that address is 949 East Channel Street, Stockton, California, 95202. If you'd like to access the project overview or review the notice of preparation and the initial study, those documents are available on the project website at acerail.com/valley_rail/. So you have access to that. We will put that website in the chat room, in the chat box, so you can have access to it there as well. Okay, so with that, I'd like to just review the agenda. Oh, I would also need to make a point that the environmental impact report process comment period will be open through September 3rd at 6 p.m. Okay, so with that, I'd like to review the agenda. We're going through the welcome. We'll talk about the open house goals and do some introductions. We're going to share with you some background about the Valley Rail Sacramento Extension project. And then we're going to give you an overview of the proposed Elk Grove Station project. And then we will walk you through the environmental review process and then get to your questions. So with that, I'd like to just introduce the project team. And when I call your name, if you wouldn't mind just waving so that the participants can put a face to a name, that would be great. So David Rapeda is the manager of capital programs with the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, and he's responsible for managing improvements for the Valley Rail program. David Levitt is the manager of regional initiatives for the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, and he has managed regional initiatives since 2012. David Williams is the project manager with Mark Thomas. Amanda Durgan is an associate environmental planner and CEQA lead with LSA. Mike Costa is the community partnerships and government relations manager with the city of Elk Grove. My name's Gladys Cornell, and I'm with AIM Consulting, and helping me this evening is Hannah Chuden and Miriam Abbas. So thank you for those. It's nice that everybody's here. I'd like to now turn it over to Councilmember Darren Suen to provide some welcoming remarks.
Thank you so much, Gladys. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so everyone for joining us this evening. I want to harken back just a little bit to Mayor Singh Allen's comments earlier. You know, the gentleman, the missing gentleman, is originated from the Stone Lake community. So those of you in District 1, please take note of that. And everybody throughout the city of Elk Grove, please keep an eye out for this gentleman. He's been missing since August 9th. Also, Mayor Singh Allen mentioned that this new station, which is located here in District 1, my district, will ease traffic and congestion. But also, this is going to bring great opportunities to our community and plug us into the regional trail network that's growing and receiving additional state funding, increasing its level of service, frequency, and points of connection. I've served on the Sacramento Transportation Authority and have heard about the Valley Rail project for several years, and excited that we're now narrowing in on what this project can mean for Elk Grove. I mean, those of you who know this area know that Apple is right here on the west side, so connecting us to that South Bay is incredibly important, and it will enable us to attract more jobs from the Silicon Valley, is my belief. We appreciate the neighborhood interest and HOA engagement, and I think the community input is very important, so that this project comes to fruition successfully and in a transparent manner and brings forward the benefits and connections we all desire. So thanks again, everybody. Look forward to this evening. And Gladys, back to you.
Thank you, Councilmember Suen. And I'd also like to welcome Councilmember and San Joaquin JPA Chair Patrick Hume, and I'd like to see if he'd like to say a few welcoming remarks.
Hi, Gladys. Thank you. Thank you, all of you who took time to participate this evening and learn more about this important project. As was mentioned, I am the City Council representative to Sacramento Regional Transit, and I am SJRRC's representative to the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, where I serve as chair of the board of directors. So I've been involved with this Valley Rail project and seen it since before it was on the other rail tracks, before it moved over to the current tracks where it's proposed. It's an important project. A lot of the environmental clearance has been done. This particular station had to be pulled out because the original proposed siting, we ran into some hurdles there that were insurmountable. And so we turned over just about every rock we could find within the city of Elk Grove in order to try and find an acceptable location. This spot where the proposed project will be located is close to jobs, it's close to services and commercial, it's obviously close to residential. And so the Valley Rail project really is important for connecting the larger region. You know, these trains will run all the way down through Stockton and then either over into the East Bay or down into the far depths of the San Joaquin Valley. And so, and then up all the way through Sacramento and serve the airport as well. So it'll be an important connection. Someday the freeways are going to be even more congested than they are now, if you can imagine that. And train ridership will open up the opportunity for a stress-free way to get between home and work and play and travel. So thank you again for being here. I look forward to tonight's discussion, and I will now turn it back over to Gladys. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Hume. So we did get a couple of questions already in the chat box, and we will get to those questions and any other questions that participants have. And I also want to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded, and when we're done with the meeting, we will make sure that the recording of it is available for you. I know that at least a couple of you need to leave early, so yes, it will be available, and we will let you know when it is up on the website. So thank you for those questions. now that we've done some introductions on our side, we would really like to hear from you a few introductory questions we have for you. So it is, you have on your screen a live polling, and we would really appreciate it if you participated in this. The first question is, which neighborhood do you live in? Do you live in Laguna West, Heritage Lakeside, Laguna Estates, Stone Lake, Glenbrook, Laguna Creek, or if not any of those neighborhoods, if you want to share what neighborhood you live in the chat box, that would be great as well. So you can just hit other and share that. The next question is, have you traveled on any of these trains before? ACE, San Juan Kings, or RT Blue Line? And then what brought you to this meeting? And you can pick all that apply. Would you like to learn about the Valley Rail Sacramento Extension Project, learn about the proposed Elk Grove station, provide your thoughts about the proposed station? And if there's another reason you're here this evening, if you wouldn't mind just sharing that in the chat box, that would be great. And then we'll just give it another couple of minutes, but it looks like everybody's quickly responding, so that's great. Okay, things appear to be slowing down a little bit, Hannah.
Yes. Would you like me to read them out?
Or you can just perhaps end the poll. And
Oh, perfect.
Get we can just look at the quickly skim. Okay. Well, it looks like we have some very good representation from a lot of neighborhoods in Elk Grove, which is fabulous. I know in the chat box we have we also have participants from the Fremont area, Sacramento, Sterling Meadows, Stockton. So welcome everybody. That it's nice to see such a great participation. It looks like we're about 40-60 on the has anybody traveled by the ACE, RT, or San Joaquin? So great opportunity to learn a little bit more and then become a passenger yourself. And then it looks like we have quite a few who are definitely interested in the Valley Rail Sacramento Extension Project and the Elk Grove Station. And we will get to some of your other ideas or questions when we're looking through the chat box. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's always nice to know who is who's with us this evening. So with that, I think we can close or remove the poll. And I'd like to invite Dan Levitt to provide an overview of the San Joaquins and the ACE and the Sacramento Extension Valley Rail Program.
Great. Thank you, Gladys. Appreciate it. Good evening to everyone. You could go back to the first slide just for a minute. There you go. I just want to first reiterate what Gladys said earlier, that the Valley Rail Program really is a joint effort between the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, who's the owner operator of the ACE Rail Service, and the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, who's the managing agency for the San Joaquins. And David Raperta and I, we do represent both agencies and both services. If you go to the next slide. So this figure shows you the route map for the San Joaquin service. Just a little bit of background about the San Joaquins. It's shown in orange on this slide. And the route goes from Oakland to Bakersfield and from Sacramento to Bakersfield. It's been operating for a number of decades. Prior to COVID, we were carrying 7 round trips, 5 between Oakland and Bakersfield, 2 between Sacramento and Bakersfield, but there's no station for Elk Grove. We also, on this map, you see a lot of green lines extending throughout the state. Those are throughway buses that most of which serve the San Joaquins to take passengers through destinations throughout the state of California, including numerous destinations in Southern California. Prior to the pandemic, we were carrying about 1.1 million passengers a year. We did, with the pandemic, our ridership did go down dramatically initially. We did reduce service for some period. We were down to 4 round trips between Oakland and Bakersfield during the worst part of the pandemic. We've already brought back one of the round trips between Oakland and Bakersfield, and we are expecting to bring back one of the Sacramento trips starting this October, and then the second one later for the early part of next year. We are currently serving Sacramento via through a bus connection at Stockton. You go to the next slide. This figure shows you the ACE route for commuter rail, and ACE and San Joaquin's are both similar in that they both run on freight track. We are like tenants to the freight. Where they're very different is the San Joaquin's are predominantly traveled on by leisure travelers, whereas ACE is almost exclusively commuters on our current service. And ACE has run for more than 2 decades. It's runs 4 daily. Prior to COVID, we were running 4 daily round trips between Stockton and San Jose, with the trains leaving in the morning, taking commuters to their businesses, and then bringing those commuters back home in the evening. Prior to the pandemic, we were carrying 1.5 million passengers a year on 4 round trips. When the pandemic hit, we did have to reduce service down to 2 round trips. We've already brought back one of those, and we are looking to bring back the 4th next month in September, in anticipation of workers in Silicon Valley starting to come back to their offices in the Silicon Valley. Go to the next slide. This figure shows you what we call our Valley Rail program. And the Valley Rail program is to extend ACE service up to Sacramento, and then also extend ACE down to Stanislaus County, to Modesto and Ceres, and then eventually all the way down to Merced. And then in addition, it's to increase San Joaquin service to Sacramento. And the Sacramento service between ACE and San Joaquin would both be on the same track. All of the yellow dots you see on this figure, those are all new stations that will be implemented as part of this program. Over the last 4 years, we've secured about $1.3 billion to fund this program, and that we are expecting the first new round trip to be from Ceres to San Jose, and for that to begin towards the end of 2023. Next slide. So this figure shows you our route coming up to Sacramento from the Valley. And the route that we'll be on will be shown in the green and purple color. The blue line that you see on this figure, that is the line that the San Joaquins have run for a number of years for the 2 round trips to Sac Valley Station. That line, the blue line, is UP's main line, which is called the Fresno subdivision. And UP would not allow any additional passenger service on that line. And that's where we really need to look at something else. And we're very fortunate that UP owns another line to the west, which is called the Sacramento subdivision. And that's the blue, sort of the green and purple line, which we'll be running on. And that line currently doesn't have any passenger service, but it has much lighter freight use as well. So we will be needing to do some improvements on that line. And also it has no stations, so we'll have to build stations on that line as well. In addition to the proposed Elk Grove station, which we're here tonight to talk about, that route, as Gladys mentioned, also has proposed stations that we expect to implement at City College, Midtown, Old North Sacramento, and then one at Natomas that would have a shuttle that would take passengers to Sacramento International Airport. Gladys also mentioned that we fully cleared the environmental work from Sacramento, Natomas, all the way down to Stockton, with the exception of the Elk Grove station. And that was because, as our chair, Councilmember Hume, noted, that we did have a location that we were studying in the past environmental document in our draft that was not at the location shown on this figure. It was north off of Casumas River Boulevard. And that site, in our draft, there was a number of comments that we received citing potential environmental impacts. And so we did feel that we needed to remove that from the document and look for a different location. And we went back to working with the city of Elk Grove and identified the site that we're here today to talk about along Laguna Boulevard. Did want to note too, on this map, you can see that beyond Sacramento, we have a dashed line. The alignment that we're running on the Sacramento subdivision does extend north beyond Sacramento, and we are working with the 3 counties north, Yuba, Sutter, and with Butte County on the possibility of future expansion to the north. And we'll start some planning work with them starting towards the end of this year on that concept. Next slide. Each line shown here on this figure represents a round trip. And where I mentioned before that ACE currently does not serve Sacramento, and San Joaquin traditionally only had 2 round trips the Sac Valley Station. This figure is showing you that with each one of these lines, that with the Valley Rail program, we're going to be adding 7 additional round trips from the Valley to Sacramento. 5 of those will be ACE round trips, and 2 of them San Joaquins. The San Joaquins are shown in blue, the ACE shown in green. And with the ACE round trips, one of them will be a train that starts in the morning from Sacramento, then comes down all the way to San Jose and then returns in the evening. 3 of them will be ACE trains in the morning, starting in series and going up to Sacramento. And then one of them will be a train that goes from Stockton to Sacramento. Next slide. So this is just sort of my summary slide here. Again, just acknowledging that the Valley Rail program is a joint program between both the San Joaquins and ACE. And it's along the Sacramento subdivision for all the future service that we're looking to add for both services. We did complete the final EIR that was done in 2020 for the Stockton to Sacramento link, but we did have to take out, so that process right now has no Elk Grove station in it. And in order to have an Elk Grove station, we do need to do this new additional environmental work in order to enable an Elk Grove station to be able to be served for the community. And that's the purpose for this meeting today and for this process. Next slide. At this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Mike Costa with the City of Elk Grove.
Thank you, Dan, and good evening, everyone. As Dan had mentioned, back actually in the past, Elk Grove, the City of Elk Grove had conducted its own independent study in partnership with the Rail Commission, looking at some potential locations along the Sac subdivision line in the western portion of Elk Grove that you can see right there in front of you for potential sightings for 4 station locations that were ultimately identified as the kind of the top 4 locations. There were several more sites studied, but these were kind of the top 4 locations that the study identified as potential sites within the city limits that could house a future rail station that was connecting to the future of passenger rail service along that subdivision line. I'll start at the bottom of the page where you see W5, W1, and W2. Those sites, starting with W5, this W5 site was located in an area of town, currently unincorporated portion of the region that's not in the city limits. And at that time, W5 was probably the site that was most likely to develop in the distant future, if any time, and it wasn't necessarily ready for immediate or near-term passenger rail services that were anticipated coming on the Sac subdivision line. So that's ultimately why that site was ruled out. Sites W1 and W2 were looked at, but potentially they had some impacts to the nearby Stone Lakes Wildlife Center, or Wildlife Preserve, I should say. And so ultimately those sites were ruled out. And then site W3, which you see circled on the map, was actually an overlay and a much larger footprint for the current site that is being looked at by the Rail Commission ACE team today. That is the site located on the corner of Dwight and Laguna. And ultimately that site was ruled out due to some extensive costs associated with the project. However, the project that's being looked at now is a slightly smaller version of the previous site that was studied before. So ultimately these 4 sites were looked at by the City of Elk Grove. However, due to some of the constraints that I mentioned earlier, a site north of the city that was mentioned by Councilmember Hume was also examined outside of the City of Elk Grove off of Casumas Boulevard, adjacent to the Franklin Station. But because of environmental concerns, that site ultimately was ruled out as well, as Dan had mentioned. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to David Williams, the project manager, to continue with the presentation.
Yes, thanks, Mike. So I'm just going to give an overview of the actual site itself, just a little bit more detail to the site. But first of all, our project objectives is for the Valley Rail Sacramento Extension Project. It's coming with or without this station, but the Elk Grove station would provide the benefit that it would serve the Elk Grove community. It would reduce the traffic congestion, improve regional air quality, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's going to enhance passenger rail, local transit service, and transit connections. And it also promotes local and regional land use and transportation sustainability goals. So the site itself, if you orientate yourself on this map, north is directly up. You've got Interstate 5 to the left. Laguna Boulevard is running across the map. So the site itself is just off of Dwight Road. The station and rail improvements are within Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way. We are actively working with a property owner that has a storage facility that accesses off Dwight Road. That's an area that we're looking at for a parking lot area. So just zooming in a little bit on the site. Once again, north in this picture is to the right. So Laguna Boulevard is here, Dwight Road is up here. So I mentioned the work within existing Union Pacific right-of-way. So there's an existing track out there that is centered in the right-of-way. So we're going to provide a new station. It's a center loading platform. So it has a rail line either side of the platform. So to be able to achieve that, we have to basically take a piece of the existing track, replace it slightly to the west, and then also provide a new track on the east side. So we'd have a track either side of this platform. The new track on the east side would also be what we call a rail siding. So it goes for about 2 miles to support trains coming into and out of the station. So that the limits of that siding is at the south end, it's at Elk Grove Boulevard. And at the north end, it stops just short of Bighorn Boulevard, which is just to the north of this area. We have, this is the storage facility area that I mentioned that has access off of Dwight Road. We're primarily looking at an area on the northern end of this site for a surface parking lot site. We're beginning the early scoping. So we're going through different ways of looking at the parking site. To link the new platform to the parking, we're looking at a pedestrian bridge that would elevate up and over the top of the new track. There's also a drainage ditch that it would elevate over, and it would connect down into the parking lot. And that there would be elevators and stairs provided at each end of that bridge for access on the platform as well as at the surface parking lot. We're also working closely with Sacramento Regional Transit on bus parking. We're going to be providing a certain amount of bus parking within the surface parking lot site. There will be a new, potentially a new intersection on Dwight Road that may be signalized. That's what we're looking at as we go more into detailed design, because that will be the primary access into and out of the surface parking lot site.
And I'm going to ask Amanda if she would, Amanda Durgan, if she would walk us through the environmental review process.
Sure, thank you, Gladys. So the California Environmental Quality Act, or more commonly known as CEQA, is a disclosure law, which means the intent of the documents prepared pursuant to CEQA inform the public, agencies, and decision-making bodies of potential impacts of the proposed projects. CEQA establishes a process for lead agencies, in this case, the Rail Commission, to consider environmental impacts of the project. So as part of that process, there is a public participation component that allows for public meetings and opportunities for members of the public and agency representatives to submit comments on CEQA documents. Next slide, please. So project scoping is an effective way for a lead agency under CEQA to bring together affected agencies and members of the public to resolve the concerns raised. Project scoping is intended to provide an early and open process for public and agency input on aspects of the proposed project, such as the proposed range of alternatives that should be evaluated in the document and anticipated environmental effects that should be considered in the environmental document. So the purpose of tonight's scoping meeting is to inform meeting participants of the upcoming Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, that will be prepared. to provide an overview of the environmental process specific to the Elk Grove Station project, and to solicit input regarding the scope of issues and any potential alternatives to the proposed project that should be evaluated in the EIR. Another important aspect of the scoping process is identifying any issues of concern or areas of controversy, both of which will be addressed in the EIR. It's important to note that tonight is the first of several opportunities to provide comment on the project as the environmental process progresses. Next slide, please. So back on August 4th, the Rail Commission published what's called a Notice of Preparation, or an NOP, announcing that it will be preparing an EIR for this project. As an attachment to the NOP, the Rail Commission issued an initial study that considered the potential effects or impacts to the resources pursuant to CEQA. So the resource topics that you see on your screen were part of that initial study. The initial study either identified impacts to the resources as no impact, less than significant with mitigation implemented, or there were some resource topics, those in red, that identified impacts that could be potentially significant. So with that, the initial study identified that there would be 4 topics that would be addressed further in the draft EIR that's proposed for publication this winter. So air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, noise and vibration, and transportation will be part of the draft EIR. Next slide, please. So the Rail Commission is the lead agency for the proposed project and will prepare what's called a focused EIR pursuant to CEQA. So the focused EIR would focus on those resource topics just previously discussed on the last slide. So the draft EIR will identify and analyze the potential environmental impacts, evaluate reasonable alternatives, develop detailed mitigation that would reduce or avoid environmental impacts, and provide information for next steps in the public review and comment process. Once the draft EIR is released, there will be additional opportunities for public and agencies to provide comment on the project and the EIR. So again, this isn't the last opportunity. This is just the beginning of the public involvement process. Next slide, please. So as Dan mentioned earlier, the Rail Commission certified the final EIR for the Valley Rail Sacramento Extension EIR back in October of 2020. And as part of that action, the Rail Commission approved station locations in Lodi, City College, Midtown, Old North Sacramento, and Natomas. So between the certification of that EIR through the first half of 2020, the Rail Commission worked closely with the City of Elk Grove to identify a site for the proposed Elk Grove Station. As was mentioned earlier, the NOP and the initial study was released back on August 4th. And since that time, the Commission has been working and meeting with stakeholders, homeowners associations, and property owners to assess the needs of the community. And although the scoping period ends on September 3rd, the Rail Commission will continue coordination efforts to keep stakeholders informed as the project develops. So as we've discussed, later this year, in the winter of 2021, we expect that the draft EIR will be published, and pursuant to CEQA, a draft EIR circulates for 45 days, during which time we'll take public and agency comments. At the close of the 45-day public comment period, the Rail Commission will consider all comments received, prepare responses to those comments, and prepare what's called a final EIR that's expected to be released in spring of 2022. And following the release of the final EIR, the Rail Commission will consider certifying the EIR and approving the project. Finally, after the close of CEQA, the Commission can begin final design and right-of-way negotiations, which is anticipated to start next summer. Next slide, please. So just a reminder that the project information, the notice of preparation, and the initial study documents are all available at the project website listed on the screen, which is also available in the chat. And then if you wish to submit comments on the NOP, please submit your comments electronically to elkgrovestation@gmail.com, or also via a hard copy at San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission at the address on the bottom of your screen.